To take a look at some famous speeches that President Franklin Roosevelt gave during his tenure as President of the United States. If you look back at kind of the great speeches in American history, Franklin Roosevelt can lay claim to two of them. One, Inaugural Address. His probably competes maybe only with Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address and John F. Kennedy's inaugural address in 1961 as some of the most famous and most quotable of the inaugural addresses. And we've got a couple of little things we want to look at with him. One of the things Franklin Roosevelt had going for him was he was a very good communicator. And that was really what the country was needing during this period of time. Now, what I'm going to do for you to avoid getting my video overview here flagged is I'm going to talk about the speeches just really briefly. This is going to be 2 or 3 minutes. And then I'm going to put them on the playlist for you on YouTube. So you'll need to head over there and check out the speeches themselves. The first is the inaugural address, and probably the most famous part of the inaugural address is him saying, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." Now you got to figure the election's in 1932, so in March of 1933, he's taking office. Now that is going to change during President Roosevelt's tenure. They actually will move up Inauguration Day, but he's taking the stage and he's talking to a country that's scared. The Great Depression's going on. Things look very grim both in the United States and around the world. And his job really is to be kind of a cheerleader, an encouraging coach for the American people. And so when he tells them we have nothing to fear but fear itself, when he promises them a new deal, what he's trying to give them is hope that things are going to get better. So check out that speech. It's not very long. Like I said, I'll link it on the playlist for you. What Franklin Roosevelt's going to do is he's going to use the power of the radio in kind of an extraordinary way. We talked about the radio in the 1920s, how these are becoming more of a common part of the home of many Americans. And so Franklin Roosevelt will use that power to talk directly to the American people. He gives weekly what he calls fireside chats. And basically these fireside chats are telling people what he's been doing for them during that particular week, sharing stories of successes, sharing things that are happening to make life better. And as he's doing this, he is encouraging the American people. There's somebody out there that's listening. There's somebody that cares about the situation you're in. And, I don't know that he ever made any false promises like this is going to be over easily, but he does promise the American people that together they can get through it. These fireside chats will be a powerful communication tool for Franklin Roosevelt during his time as President of the United States. It's something that presidents have continued up until the current day. And a lot of times there will be a presidential radio address. Different presidents do it at different times, either on a Saturday or a Sunday, to just kind of address concerns the American people may have, tell them what's coming up in the days and weeks ahead. But for people in the Great Depression, just the idea of knowing that after really, we talked about Herbert Hoover with that laissez-faire, hands-off economic policy. Franklin Roosevelt wanted to encourage them that your government is doing something. We can't promise you it's all going to work, but we can promise you we're going to try some things, and as we try those things, then things will get better. Well, this last little section, we've been looking at the lead up to really World War II. And the United States, just like we did in World War I, will not join World War II at the beginning. World War II is going to start in September of 1939. We don't join World War II until the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in December of 1941. But Franklin Roosevelt is a wise enough leader that he can anticipate the United States having to join this fight. But he's got to talk the American people into it. And so in January of 1941, so 11 months before Pearl Harbor is going to be hit, he gives what becomes known as his Four Freedoms speech. And again, I'm going to link that speech for you on the playlist. But in that speech, he looks at four freedoms that Americans hold dear. And what he wants to do is indirectly draw lines between us and the type of regimes he sees taking power in Europe. So when you see something like this, when you see the four things that he's going to be speaking about, think about how those are different than what you already know about conditions in fascist Italy or Nazi Germany, the places that we're going to be struggling against during World War II. Now, Norman Rockwell is a famous American artist. He used to provide a lot of covers or back pages for what was called the Saturday Evening Post. And so his artwork would have been easily recognizable to people in this day. And so what will happen is they actually take the four freedoms, and he will draw a picture representing each. And then they're going to use these actually on propaganda posters in World War II. But let's take a closer look at each of the four. So let's take a look at each one of these real briefly. The first here is freedom of worship. The freedom of worship obviously is canonized by our First Amendment, that our country will not have an established religion or interfere with the free exercise of religious beliefs. And so what Franklin Roosevelt is trying to do is to grab onto some of these things that we hold dear and say, when we have to fight, right, without saying it, these are the things we're going to be protecting. Do you want to be able to worship in the way you see fit, with the God that you see fit? This could be under threat if we don't push back against what's happening in Europe. My wife and I, over the summer, watched a pretty cool little limited series on Amazon Prime called The Man in the High Castle. And it's based on a book. I read the book too, it was good, that imagines a world where the Nazis and the Japanese won World War II, split the United States into two separate parts, and just kind of what the world would look like. And it was interesting to look at. It was disturbing to look at, to kind of give imagination to what would have happened really with the unimaginable. But if you haven't seen that and you enjoy that sort of thing, I'd recommend that series to you. The next one is freedom from fear. It's mom and dad tucking in their kids. If you look closely at the newspaper headline that the father's holding, it's talking about bombings that are happening. But basically the idea that we want our children to be able to go to sleep in a world where they're not worried about waking up in the morning. And so if the United States is going to fight, we're going to fight for this freedom we have from being afraid. Harkens back, of course, to that theme you see in his inaugural address of having nothing to fear but fear itself. Freedom of speech. Freedom of speech, this is probably the most famous one. If you've seen one of these, maybe this one or the next one. This fellow, who knows what kind of meeting he's at, but he's standing up and he's giving his opinion as his fellow countrymen pay attention, look on. Who knows what he's talking about? Who knows what the issue of the day is? But the idea is, in the United States, he's allowed to express that opinion, and that was a freedom that we wanted to preserve. The last one is a freedom from want. Now, think about 1940. We're still in the Great Depression. Those New Deal programs Franklin Roosevelt has put in have helped, but ultimately it will be the amped up production in World War II that will draw us ultimately out of the Great Depression. There aren't a whole lot of families who have seen a turkey like this at a family dinner or Thanksgiving. There aren't a whole lot of families who have the nice place settings and things like that you see. But the idea is that in the world the United States imagines, that Franklin Roosevelt's imagining, people don't have to want for things. This would have been a powerful message, connecting with his audience about what ultimately the United States was going to be fighting for. And so those are the 4 freedoms. Like I said, I want you to spend a little time, head to that YouTube playlist, take a look at the Inaugural Address and the 4 Freedoms speech. Give them a listen and see what you think. It might help to pull up 2. I've got linked for you on Canvas, or you can pull it up with a Google search. The words of the speeches to follow along, just to make sure you're getting the things that are important as you're reading those.